When I was a junior in college, I got a call that changed my life forever. I still remember exactly where I was sitting. I got the call that my mom, someone I have loved and respected so much, was just diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I had so many questions going through my head. But the first thing was, why is life so unfair? You know, my mom had just started the second set of her career. She had changed her career. She's an amazing physician. And it was very hard. My mom's a physician. I've seen patients who have Parkinson's. And I remember when I talked to my professor who was sitting across from me, he said, it's like waiting for a truck to hit you. You know it's going to happen. You're just waiting for years. So many questions went through my mind, and it's still hard for me to talk about that moment today. And I thought to myself, how can I help? There must be a good medicine. Something must be there. And what I found out, I flew to Singapore. I took her there. I took her to many doctors or clinics where I realized that there was nothing that really treated the cause of Parkinson's, just the symptoms. And I'm standing here exactly 20 years after she was diagnosed. And since those 20 years, the number of disease-modifying medicines, which means you're really treating the root cause for Parkinson's, that's been approved, is 0. That lit a fire in me that became my purpose, to ensure that somebody else sitting in that same seat, getting that same call, would have better options that my mom did then and doesn't even have today. So how do we go about that? When you think about how medicines are made, when you think about all the breakthroughs and leaps in science that's happened, there's one pattern that emerges. And that pattern is really around being able to make things that were invisible to us, but revealing it to us. Let's take the microscope, for instance. Before the microscope, diseases were a mystery. We couldn't even look at cells and understand what was driving the disease. But since then, it has unlocked so much. Germ theory, how we understand infections. I mean, think about it. Think about antibiotics. Infections used to be fatal diseases. The average life expectancy used to be in the 30s. Now we live to 80s and maybe 100 or more. It's changed it from a fatal disease to something that we can actually treat, and added decades to our lifespan and health span. And it also built the foundation of medicine. But I just want to say something before we get to the next one. You know, the whole invention of the microscope, if you look at the scientists who did that, they faced disbelief, persecution even, because the world wasn't ready to believe what they had found. Take the next wave in innovation, the genome. The genome has let us understand the vocabulary of life, to really understand the code that makes us who we are. It has done so much. Cancer genomics, precision medicine, CRISPR editing. What does all mean? Instead of having a one-size-fits-all when it comes to a medicine, we can actually personalize the medicine for the right patient. It has allowed us to understand how our bodies form. Why are we different from each other at a genetic level? And also, how do diseases begin? But just like the innovation of the microscope, it took decades of disbelief, persecution, and a lot of grit and resilience to get to where we are, to start mapping the biology of disease. And now, the revolution that's going on right now, the use of AI in order to better understand what drives diseases. So, you know, people argue a lot about how much of biology do we really understand. Some people say it's 5%, some people say it's 8%. Well, what I say is the number is tragically low. Think about it. We're trying to make medicines when we only understand 5 to 8% of biology. The foundation is so limited. But with AI and automation, we can now run millions of experiments. We can generate billions of data points and then leverage artificial intelligence to really be able to discern subtle changes that you can't discern with your eye. And that is revealing hidden relationships, new relationships that we have never known about before. What about making medicines? Did you know that there are 10 to the 60th possible small molecules that can make a drug? That is more than the total number of grains of sand on the earth. And AI can help, and is starting to help, us explore that search space better to then identify what's the 1 or 2 or 3 molecules that can actually become a drug. Earlier diagnosis. A lot of what we just talked about in terms of leveraging AI is now also being used in order to identify the earliest fingerprints of disease before symptoms even appear. We all know, diagnose earlier, you improve your chances of surviving the disease. Look, this gives me a lot of hope. And I'll tell you why. You know, I work at Recursion. I have the privilege to lead Recursion as the CEO. And it's a company where we're using AI and automation and a lot of lab work in order to really understand and decode biology. But what does that actually mean? We're generating millions of experiments, billions of data points in order to discern relationships that we couldn't see before, and also confirm relationships and biology that we know of today. Remember that 5 to 10%? What if we could turn that to 30, 40, 50% of understanding biology? So look, just like each wave I mentioned before, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of disbelief, but we have to evolve, we have to learn, we have to change, we have to adapt to really turn and make this next leap in science real. So when I look at that, what really strikes out to me is that when it comes to the various evolution of science, it's not actually just the tools that expand our possibilities. It's the mindset that we bring to it. It's the mindset of actually ensuring that we harness the power and value of all of these solutions to turn that progress into impact. And look, the only way we do it is by reinventing ourselves over and over and over again, to rise to the challenge of these new solutions and tools being created, but to harness the value of that. Then the next question comes, how do you personally reinvent yourself? I like to think of myself as a student of life. So I watch and I observe, and there's a lot of papers about this as well. But there are 4 components, 4 qualities that become critical for those that actually thrive through change. First, preparedness. Second, adaptability. Third, courage. And 4th, effort, pace. The quiet rhythm of reinvention. And pace isn't just for CEOs or scientists. It is for anyone who's at the crossroads of change. And all of us are. Let's face it, the amount of change that we're going to see in the next 10 years is going to be eclipsed by what change we've seen in the last 10. So it's even more relevant now to have a framework, to have a guiding approach, to really ensure that you meet the future at your terms, not at the terms of others. So let's go into pace a little bit more. P, preparedness. Seeing around corners before anyone else does. There's actually somebody in the audience today who's my mentor who taught me this. Sounded daunting at first, but now that I better understand it, preparedness is the work that nobody else sees. It's that quiet discipline of learning, self-learning, getting it wrong, having humility, and going at it again. It is that quiet time of anticipating what the world would look like in 5 years, 10 years? I'll give you a couple of examples in my life in terms of preparedness. The first was that weird grad student that was coding and doing lab work at the same time. You know, I taught myself to code when I was 5, very young, because I could sense that the world around us was moving. The purpose of it was driven by the fact the way we make medicines is just not good enough. You know, when I graduated from my PhD, a friend of mine actually gave me a lab coat with a hoodie stitched to it, because that's how strange it was to do both. And now that's the field that's leading in the space. But preparedness is also around understanding your blind spots. So when I was almost finishing my PhD, I went to this large seminar, and there was a really important pharma exec. And there were about 200 people in the seminar, and I raised my hand, and I was more shy back then, let's just put it that way. And I asked the question, how do you figure out, how do you determine which medicines you make? How do you know what to pick? And what he said to me was, you're a scientist, right? I said, yeah, I'm a grad student. I went to Penn. And he said, don't worry about it. The business people figure out. We tell you what to do. I felt really dismissed in front of so many people I knew. A couple of hours later, I felt insulted. A couple of days later, I turned that into information. I said, you know, he is right. This is a space, the system around science, the business around science is something that I don't understand. So I promised myself I would build that capability before anybody would ask for it. I taught myself. Because I refuse to have somebody put me in a box. I will build my own box. Preparedness is really creating the foundation for reinvention. Adaptability. Letting go of who you were to become who you need to be. This is hard, right? Letting go of parts of you to be that next evolved person. You know, if preparedness helps you to prepare for that next chapter, adaptability is really what helps you get through the door. It's those moments of when you're in a new room that you've never been in before. And as you're in that room, every ounce of you feels like you're an outsider, but you still hold on, you still stay. You learn the new languages that's going around you. And guess what? You evolve without ever losing your core. So from my PhD, you know, I prepared myself for the business world. I went to BCG. Oh my God, that was the hardest transition I have ever made in my life. Harder than the CEO transition I'm making right now. Why? The world was completely different. The questions that were asked, the pace of how you do things, the way you communicate. I was going from industry to industry, a different client every 3 months. It tested every part of me. But I held on, and I evolved. And that is the approach to adaptability. Adaptability is being in that uncomfortable situations, because that, and learning really fast, because that is what helps you meet the future on your terms. Third, courage. Stepping into the unknown even though it's uncomfortable, because you're prioritizing impact over discomfort or comfort. You know, courage, people often think of courage as fearlessness. I think of courage as stepping forward with fear because the mission demands it. You know, when I went to J&J after BCG, a really successful company, and I started building an AI team. Many people said to me, and this is the early days, right, before it was cool or real. Many people said to me, Najat, why would you take on this uphill battle? Why would you piss so many people off if you don't get it right? What if you put your career at risk? What if there's no I in AI? I heard all those questions. But courage is asking a very different question. It's asking two important questions. Number one, what becomes possible if I do try? And number two, who pays the price if I don't? Courage is being comfortable with uncertainty, taking the harder path because the impact far outweighs the discomfort that you feel at that point. Courage is really what helps you not just walk through the door, which is adaptability, but stay in that room despite every hard moment when you want to walk back out. Effort. I call this the unglamorous grind, sustained over time so that you'd really turn potential to impact. Look, as I mentioned, having the privilege to lead a company like Recursion. In this industry, 90% of drugs that people try to make fails. So you have a 10% success rate, very low. Now couple that to building a company that is using AI to make medicines in a very different, better way. Very hard, no template, no blueprint. Effort is that unglamorous grind where you're working at it every single day. You get it wrong sometimes, you learn from it. You get it right sometimes, you cheer a little bit and then get back to it. It's really thinking from first principles. It's really throwing away the old and thinking about what is that approach that could make a difference. Effort is the unglamorous grind that actually makes the entirety of reinvention real. You know, people often ask me, Najat, what makes a company or a person iconic or thrive in an area of change and innovation? It's value over visibility. It's impact over credit. And it's always effort that's sustained to carry you the distance. Those people reinvent themselves over and over and over again. The part that ties it all together for me, for PACE, the quiet rhythm of invention, is really purpose. My purpose has always been one and the same. My mom. And so many millions of patients like that are waiting. You know, one thing I keep in my room is Teddy Roosevelt's Person in the Arena. I've edited it from Man in the Arena. But it really speaks to the fact that the credit goes to the person that dares to show up, pushes hard, makes mistakes, but still keeps going. And when you think about all of these different arenas of innovation, so many different tools, the invisible hand truly is the person that rises to the challenge, the person that is actually able to make a change by rising up, reinventing themselves, and truly not just setting the pace, defining the pace for what our future will look like. Thank you.